What's up, everyone? Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Zach Maxwell, president of Texas Hemp Growers and host of In the Field podcast. Zach Maxwell, president of the Texas Hemp Growers. Thank you for being on, man.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're going to have a lot of good topics to talk about today. I know there's a lot going on within the industrial hemp market, not only nationwide, but of course within Texas. So why don't you start off by just letting everybody know who you are and what your organization does?
Sure. I'm Zach Maxwell. I'm the president of Texas Hemp Growers. We are an association representing farmers, processors, manufacturers, retailers, and even consumers of hemp and hemp byproducts. And so this is an organization that I started last year, and as of today, we're over 200 members strong. And it is really the objective of this organization to make sure that every member is successful in whatever industry or whatever part of the industry they're trying to embed themselves. And so, our organization has found that we have not only growers, but we have nurseries that want to maybe do starts. We have cloning operations. We have folks that want to do seeds. Some people join our association that are not farmers at all. We have some presidents of some economic development corporations. We have consultants, legal type folks that I believe are just kind of interested in being part of a movement of winners. And that's really a big philosophy here, is that we want everybody to win. And winning in this industry, in my opinion, is defined as, for a grower specifically, is defined as being able to grow this plant and make a profit from it. And so it's been a big focus of mine as we have developed Texas Hemp Growers very rapidly to make sure that we are on the edge of where we need to be in order to position everybody for the most amount of success that we can. So, but otherwise, our organization, obviously, some of your followers may remember that we actually traveled the state earlier this year, and even last year, we were going around the state and doing educational classes for farmers. And quite frankly, we were able to reach thousands of farmers all over this state, from Dallas to Amarillo. I went to El Paso, went down to Rio Grande Valley. So we touched pretty much every corner of the state, and we're able to get people excited and also help them understand the risk and the challenges that are part of being a grower, or really just even being part of the industry. So, those educational courses were all basically positioned around the concept that we want to help first-time growers and even advanced growers avoid some of the pitfalls that cost farmers in other states a lot of money, and in some cases bankrupted them, in fact. And so we don't want that to happen here in Texas. I feel like, as you mentioned earlier, this industrial hemp market is really just now starting to take off. And if these farmers are not successful in doing this, then how can we expect them to stay with hemp? How can we expect them to eventually possibly move into fiber and grain applications down the road? So I certainly don't want hemp to become another guar, if you're familiar with the background on that. And so in a way, Texas Hemp Growers is really just trying to keep everybody afloat of what's happening. And I feel like we're doing a pretty good job of it.
Okay, so you said a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. That was a great overview of an about me of your association, or of your organization, which is great. And I love the mission in that it's to protect everyone involved in the industry, right? Starting with the farmers, the processors, the dispensary, the retail side of it, and also the education. So let's back up a little bit and let's talk about you for a second. So what made you get started in hemp, and why are you so passionate about your organization's cause?
Sure. So I would say that the main inspiration for me to be doing what I'm doing today is my dad, Perry Maxwell. And if you've ever heard me talk at any of my classes before, I talk about this actually, which is that my dad and I were actually going into business together to do some of the retail side of the CBD business. My dad had suffered, at the time he was suffering with a very chronic condition of foot neuropathy, where basically he couldn't really walk. It was like walking on pins and needles for him. And so at the time, or really several years ago, he was on some very heavy opioid medications. One in particular was called tramadol, which I'm sure every time I've ever mentioned it, there always seems to be people that are familiar with it
Yep.
and understanding it's devastating. And we dealt with some very devastating health issues with my dad as a result of that medication there. And so CBD oil was just now, or was at the time just coming online. You really did not have a lot of the mainstream retail shops that you do today back then. And so it was one of those things where myself and another friend of his convinced him to try some CBD oil there, and it did. The long story short here is it helped him walk again. It helped alleviate his pain. It also helped him get off of opioid medications. And so by the end of that there, he was not taking those damaging medications anymore. And so for me, that was an experience. First of all, I wouldn't wish it on anybody's family to have to deal with the type of medical trauma that our family dealt with as a result of the opioid medications that my dad was taking. And so back last year, we had just started up a business together. He had come to really believe in CBD oil, and we were researching it and learning everything we could, and had gotten connected with a really great retailer here out of Texas, and we were off to the races. And then my dad passed away last April. And so we had only had our business going for about 2 months, and then he suddenly died. Was a heart attack. Was totally unexpected. And then about a month later after that, a lot of the banks, this was about the time where Elevon shut down all of their account holders. If anybody remembers that going on, the fact is there was basically a purge of financial services, and the business that my dad and I had started got caught up in that. And so we weren't able to bring our services to the public anymore. And so, but after my dad died, it was actually really devastating on me. And it was also an eye-opening experience, because you start to kind of realize your own mortality, and that I honestly felt like I wasn't doing as much as I could do. Even that business that I was starting with my dad, I started to feel like maybe I needed to go and serve a greater purpose than just that. And so I had already been learning about hemp through our development of CBD and understanding the retail and the commercial side of all that. And it was a natural bridge there. I felt that by going out and servicing these farmers, I really love public speaking, if you can't tell. So for me, being able to go out and talk about something and teach and help people avoid, potential bankrupting type issues in their operation, I just felt like was really doing a service to my dad. and doing a service for our state. I feel like, or I felt like at the time that I could be doing a lot more. And in fact, over a year later, I'm totally surprised. I'm totally blown away about what I've built just since then and all that time. And so that kind of gives you there the background of why and how I got into this business and why I was inspired to be part of it. I kind of see a larger cause in all of this as, if I can help hundreds, maybe even potentially thousands of people that are trying to get into this industry, find their place and find some success, then I feel like that I will be serving a greater purpose that will make my dad, very proud.
Mm-hmm. Well, I first want to say I'm so sorry for your dad's loss. I cannot imagine how that feels and what you went through at the time, what you were feeling. I will say it sounds like, just like that the saying, some things happen for a reason, in terms of, this was that moment kind of sounds like it fired you up to not only continue to work on what you were building with your dad, but it's led you to so many other things, right? And that's kind of seems like what your purpose right now is, to just ensure that this industry stays alive and it's healthy and it's well and everyone is succeeding. Which is great, man. One other point I want to make is, yes, I can tell you love public speaking, and I'm surprised you sound like a politician, like you should be running for office. Are you planning to run for president in 2020 as an independent, or?
Oh man. Well, let's just put it this way. I left a life of politics behind. So I actually was very involved in politics for about 9 years. And so for me, it's actually, but now to your question of whether or not I'm running, I'll be honest with you, I don't fit the political mold. Often for people to get into politics, they have to do a certain amount of pandering and selling their soul and capitulating to ideas that maybe they don't necessarily agree with. And I'm a pretty morally grounded person. And that, if you're familiar with politics at all, that generally, your politicians, there's not a whole lot of moral ground standing going on. A lot of it is just, caving to donors and special interests and stuff like that. So I'm very versed in politics. And in fact, Texas hemp growers, to kind of back up a second, actually, is that one of the reasons we started Texas hemp growers is because I was actually involved back whenever they were even passing the bill. And I was calling state representatives, including my own state representative, who had no clue about the bill. They did not know what hemp was. They did not know the differences between cannabis and hemp, and that there were other applications that could possibly come out of it. And so that to me was a concerning factor. I was like, going, why do so many of our representatives not seem to understand what this is? Who is representing us? Who is in this industry doing it? So I basically have leveraged my political experience and said, well, why not start a group that is going to bring us collective power when it comes to approaching things like legal, legislative work. There's some things, and we can talk about it, I'm sure, here. The smokable flower ban is something that is very much on our radar. And so having a large group that can influence that discussion and that we can take to Department of Agriculture and Department of State Health Services and say, look, this isn't just Zach Maxwell coming at you. This is 200 plus members of Texas hemp growers that also want to see this change, this change, this change. And so, that to me is kind of a longer term goal of this organization, is to be able to leverage its membership in order to make the laws more favorable to growers and processors and even sellers. And like I said, we'll probably talk on some of that here in a bit.
Yeah, well, that's actually a perfect segue, because that one of the first questions I was going to ask you is, for Texas hemp growers, what are some of the most important issues that y'all are trying to advance right now at the Texas legislative level?
Sure. So I would say the number one issue that we have been focused on, and I'm sure you've seen us making a lot of saber rattling. We've been doing some saber rattling, is what I call it. Is the Smokeable Flower ban, which what that is the Department of State Health Services is basically telling retailers and distributors that they cannot sell those products here in Texas, and very specifically, they're really trying to limit pre-rolls and vape pens and stuff like that. We still feel very confident that we can do whole flower in jars direct to customers, as long as it's not, as long as it's labeled not for consumption. But obviously we don't want to have to work in gray areas. So for us, we really want to make sure that we can get the law. There's a very specific segment of the law that was passed in the state a couple of years ago that allows for them to ban the processing and manufacturing of smokable hemp products. And so we want to be able to, this next session that's coming up on us pretty quickly, to talk to our local elected leaders and get some changes, like, striking that ban out of the language. We would also like to see some things. The fees, in my opinion, are very, they're large. We would like to see less fees, less regulation. It would be nice to see some kind of license option for personal growers as well. I know that that's been a major concern that I've heard about, is that, well, even if I wanted to grow 1 or 2 plants for my own personal consumption, you have to go through all the licensing, all the testing, all of that stuff. And so, excuse me, it would be nice if we could work towards that and get something that is more favorable there. And then, there's little tweaks. There's obviously little tweaks that we can make in the law. Things that would make the life of farmers easier. This is actually something that's beyond what Texas can do, but if we can eventually get the THC threshold increased. Right now, as you know, we're working under that total THC limit, which technically is not how it's defined in the federal law. And so there needs to be some action there that forces that federal law to be interpreted as it's written. And if we could do that, that would increase the value of this industry, perhaps double it, just because the growers would be able to actually maximize the value of their plants. So those are a few of the things that I would like to see worked on. I know we're keeping a list, and we've got now a pretty decent open dialogue with this Hemp Advisory Council. There's just some things, there's little things in the law that, believe it or not, are creating problems there for very specific situations, and it'll just take a matter of time to get those worked through.
Mm-hmm. Hey, are you hearing me when I'm trying to interject and ask questions? I want to make sure, because I feel like I'm screaming, and I apologize to the audience.
Are you? Because it's not at all.
No? Okay, because I've several times tried to ask you to, because you're giving a lot of information, and it's good information, but I really want to break it down. Basically, the platform of this podcast is to educate just kind of the everyday person, the average person who's not totally immersed in cannabis or industrial hemp. So let's back up and talk about all these different issues that you're trying to advance when it comes to the Texas hemp growers. So first of all, you mentioned the Department of the State Department of Health and Services has basically wants to impose a ban on smokable hemp flower. My question to you is, why are they wanting to do that? Is it health? Obviously, it has to do with health concerns. But my next question is, how does that hurt the industry?
So why they're doing that is really a mystery still. There's some theories out there. They're not doing it for health and safety. There's nothing in the law that allows for the ban on retail and distribution. So I want to delineate that, is that what they're trying to do is a total ban. What the law technically allows for is just the ban of processing and manufacturing smokable hemp products. So that's a very specific statement in the law. Department of State Health Services, has basically come through, and they've broadened that scope. They're saying we're going to completely ban hemp flower. They've not given any legitimate reason for it that I know of. The theory is that law enforcement groups are behind this. Maybe the Sheriff's Association or maybe a DA's association is pushing in the background for it. I've actually got an open records request in with the Department of State Health Services to pull the comments that they've been receiving, so I can find out for sure if they've been getting any feedback like that from law enforcement. But it doesn't appear to be that they're doing it for health and safety reasons. So the only thing that we can come up with is that law enforcement just doesn't want to deal with having to do testing on flower products in order to prosecute. Because as you probably know, the way the law is written now is that basically even for marijuana offenses, the DA, they have to get a test on that done. So, but to your second question there, which is, how does this affect the industry? Well, first of all, this is going to devastate retailers. So you have some retailers in this state that get 50 to 80% of their business comes from the sale of the flower, either whole or in the form of like pre-rolls or vape pens, things like that. I know one particular retailer in DFW that manufactures pre-rolls. They will not be able to do that anymore. So companies like that, and there's already a company that has had to do this. They'll have to move that stuff out of state. So this, and not to get too far off in a tangent here, but if you go and look at the rules that Dishes wrote there, it has some parts in there where they suggest that these rules will have no negative impact on the economy, none whatsoever. We couldn't find any negative impact on the economy. Well, the reality is the exact opposite. This ban is going to send processing and manufacturing jobs to states like Oklahoma and Colorado, areas like that. So we are, and then you've got retailers that could lose up to 50%, 80% of their revenue in a few rare cases. And that's devastating right now, considering the economic environment this entire country's in. And it's just punitive. This is a punitive thing, in my opinion, that Dishes is doing. They're deliberately targeting this product without any claim or evidence that it's causing an issue, and they're just trying to ban it. And so it's not good for the industry, and let's hope that they listen to the comments that they received the last 30 days.
That's right. I know that y'all had on your, you've been posting on social media that I think this Monday was the final day to submit your comments and your concerns and thoughts on that proposal, right?
Yes. And you probably saw that we also raised $15,000 to bring legal action against the Department of State Health Services. And we're working with a very experienced cannabis attorney right now, who is preparing the actions that all the parties, because it's not just going to be us. There is another party in this case here who has been severely damaged already by this rule. And so, but yeah, Monday was the last day, and we're just waiting to see now what they do. Are they going to come back and listen to? I was told that they potentially received 700 plus comments. If Dishes ignores that many comments from the public, and assuming the better majority of them are positive for smokable hemp, then we've got some changes that we've got to make, internally there at that department.
Well, and so at this point, what stage are we at? So is this just a proposal that they're putting forward as a recommendation that could be eventually put to a vote, or is it already on its way to being voted on?
So there's no vote here, and it's pretty much a done deal. What we were commenting on was the final proposed rules. So these rules already went through a draft phase, and those were published last December. And then they received comment back then on it, and they came back with this new version, which wasn't really very new, and it still had the smokable hemp ban in it. So it means that any comments that were received last year or earlier this year did not have any effect. So right now what it is that basically this is just a statutory posting process of allowing the public to comment. My understanding is that as of Monday, these rules are effective. And so it's just a matter of dishes starting to enforce them. Once again, maybe we're going to hear something later this week. Maybe Department of State Health Services is going to come to their senses, and they're going to realize that attempting to ban retailing and distribution is not covered under the law, and that they're going to face legal challenge over that, and maybe they'll back up. And if they do, I imagine there would then have to be another publishing in the Texas Register of the Rules and probably an open comment period, which could obviously push that out for another month or two there. So, but not being, a total professional on how that rulemaking process works, that is my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the positive thing is that, like you said, the 700 comments, the people that really took action and made their voices heard is really a good thing. We need more in this industry. So
absolutely,
yeah. So, are there any other specific issues outside of just the smokable ban that the Texas hemp growers are looking to advance that you want to talk about?
Well, and of course we touched on some of them already there, but I could talk about some of the immediate issues that we're seeing. First of all, there's a problem right now that nurseries are facing. Texas Department of Agriculture has a process for getting licenses and permitting lots in nurseries. And so right now, one of the things that we're finding is that TDA is telling nurseries that they have to get a lot permit for every customer that buys starts or buys clones from them. This is not how the rules are written, by the way. The rules are written as just one lot permit per variety, and as long as that whole lot checks out, then nothing should stop the nursery from being able to just have one lot permit service multiple customers. So what this is doing is this is causing some nurseries to just back away altogether and say they're not even going to do starts or clones because it actually costs more to buy them from the nursery in state based on TDA's sort of cumbersome interpretation of lot permitting, that it's actually cheaper to go out of state and buy these plants because they don't have to pay all the fees and stuff if they're being shipped out of state. So we literally just received clones from Colorado for this exact reason, because we could not buy them here in state without having to pay an extra $400 in permitting fees to the company that was selling them. So that's an issue right there, because that obviously, once again, is driving opportunity out of the state. We would like to see that fixed. Maybe somebody from TDA is watching and they can fix that quickly. Would be nice. There is also just a concern about the fact that apparently we cannot breed our own genetics here in Texas. So once again, this is sort of like a gross overinterpretation by TDA of the rules, where basically they've written these rules in such a way, according to them, that the only license holders that will be able to actually produce seed, and what I mean by that is like their own version of genetics, one that hasn't been previously grown out of the state.
That's why that, like, what would be the purpose of doing that? Like, why wouldn't we want to have our own authentic genetics homegrown in Texas?
I think it was an accident, honestly. I think TDA wrote the rules in such a way that they didn't realize when they were writing them that they actually are worded in such a way that here's how it works. If you want to get a seed on TDA's approved list, you have to be able to provide TDA 3 COAs on that seed. Well, the law also says that you cannot grow a seed in Texas unless it's approved by TDA. So do you see the problem? Nobody would be able to ever have those COAs developed here in the state. We would have to develop it out of state and bring them back in. So I don't think that that was purposeful. I think that that was probably an unintended consequence. And, you know, hopefully we can get TDA to, because yeah, TDA basically told somebody, and that person shared the email in our group actually, was that basically the only people that would be able to breed Texas genetics would be institutions of research like Texas A&M. So I don't know if that was deliberate or if it was just an accident. I hope it was an accident.
If it was an accident, it seems like that could be a pretty easy conversation to have on both sides of the table, right? I mean, sit down and be like, look, there's one piece of this legislation or this regulation that says this, they kind of don't match up, you know, so how can we rectify it, you know? So to your point, hopefully that is a mistake.
Right. Well, and you know, you probably maybe saw, we had some posts last week about the Hemp Advisory Council, and I was giving them a hard time because, you know, there is an advisory council there that is advising TDA on the rollout of these rules. And so as these, I have so many members now that are calling me on a near daily basis with different dilemmas. Some of them are running into things that TDA has never even thought about, because even I haven't even thought about it. I had somebody calling me and telling me about a transplant issue. Go ahead, sorry.
I said, just because it's so new, the industry is at the ground floor. I mean, everybody's learning. That makes sense.
So hopefully we can get faster action through that advisory council. We've got some really good dialogue there. I feel like that they're hearing these concerns now and are going to make them a priority for TDA. I'm not trying to be a fly on TDA on a lot of this stuff, because the other thing too that I give them total credit for is that they've had to roll out this program without any increase in their budget from the state. So they did not receive any extra employees or any extra funding to roll out this program. So I know they've been working very hard on it. And that's why I say, you know, things like the seed genetic, I don't think that was purposeful. I don't picture TDA wants to send agriculture opportunity to other states. I do not think that that's the case at all.
It's just, I think you're right. Also, I think it's just education and evolution of the industry, right? It's saying, oh, wait, okay, this piece of the puzzle doesn't really fit, and oh, now it does, because we can tweak that law, we can change this, we can change that. That we're going to see a lot of that tweaking, I think, going on over the years. And it takes discussions like this where you have experts in different disciplines to really help us think through all those aspects. You know,
Absolutely.
One aspect I want to talk to you about is that I've heard a lot with many associations across the country is fraud and ensuring that our farmers are protected, right, and others within the industry. How is the Texas hemp growers helping address fraud?
Okay, so can you give maybe a more specific instance of fraud? Are you talking about like a farmer getting their biomass stolen by a processor, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's one example. The over-promising or under-delivering of certain, agreements, or even not even contracts in place, right? Where a farmer spends so much money to put a seed in the ground, and then once it is harvested, he's sitting on it. He can't even
Right.
all.
So
Right?
yeah, and I don't know if I'd call that fraud in a lot of cases. I think of fraud being, you know, very deliberately criminally negligent and misleading. But you know, first of all, just kind of back to what I already talked about, which is that we travel the state. Here in Texas, I very specifically wanted to go around the state and talk to these farmers about some of the problems, some of the fraudulent issues that were occurring. You know, for example, one thing that I would consider fraud would be the seed brokers out there that try to pass off industrial hemp seed as feminized. And of course, the difference there being that industrial is going to be a 50-50 male to female ratio, while the feminized is going to be almost 100% female guarantee. And this was an early problem I identified out in Colorado and New Mexico, was that there were growers. And this kind of blows my mind that anybody would even buy from somebody like this. But apparently there were, in fact, brokers that would show up at the door with a Ziploc baggie of seeds, no label, no nothing, you know, oh, hey, we've got some feminized seeds here, and they would sell them. And a farmer would somehow feel comfortable enough to buy them. And what was going on there was that these growers are out in their fields all summer, every day, sweating their tails off, having to pull all these plants out of the field, all these male plants that are popping up out of the field. So that is fraud. That's fraud. And I'm going to tell you, you know, the best thing, the best weapon against that type of behavior is education. It's shining a light on it. We were very, as we have built out our Facebook group online, you may remember early on in our group, we were very strict about no promoting seeds until they have been approved by TDA. And that was to keep some of those bad actors from just showing up and trying to pass, you know, industrial seed off as feminized. So the contract side of things, you know, you talked about the farmers that find themselves at the end of a harvest and they're sitting on stuff. This is one of those issues that is, first of all, there are examples of processing companies that they get into these contract agreements with growers that they're going to give them the seed, they're going to give them the equipment, they're going to give them everything they need. All they've got to do is just farm it, and we'll even come out there and take it out of your field and dry it and process it. We're going to give you a foot rub while you're doing it. And I would say that the farmers that are finding themselves caught up in those scenarios are farmers who are buying into something that sounds too good to be true. I just came across one of these deals, and it's some company out of Georgia that is promoting industrial fiber, supposedly 250,000 acres, that they're promising farmers they're going to pay them almost $800 an acre. All you've got to do is grow it. All you've got to do is just take receipt of the seed, and we're going to have our specialty crop consultant come out and examine your field, and you're going to get, you know, help the day that you're ready to plant. We're going to have physical labor in the field to help you actually get everything off the ground. And, oh, we're going to send the equipment to you. We're going to come out and take it off your field and process it. And all of this stuff, when you think about it, simply doesn't add up. Mm-hmm. You know, so a lot of times when we talk about overcoming things like fraud, sometimes it's really not fraud. Sometimes it's just, well, in a case like that, it could be fraud, but sometimes it's just recognizing some of these deals sound too good to be true. You know, farmer needs to go out there. They need to either find a retailer that they can partner up with, get close to, know that they're developing a direct relationship with the buyer, or they need to find somebody or some organization. And this is something that our organization, by the way, has stepped up to the plate on, is that, you know, one of the things that I think this industry misses is that the farmer is not a salesperson. So the farmer is thinking that they just farm it and somebody's going, okay, you're saying something right now, and I can't hear you though.
What I'm saying is that the majority viewpoint? Is that the farmer is the seller also? Is that a majority?
I think a lot of so one of the worst offenders of this are seed companies, right? So there's a lot of seed companies out there that want to sell farmers seeds at $1 a piece, and then they just want to walk away from the farmer and let the farmer figure everything else out. And in this industry, with how new it is here in Texas, for example, we don't have processors online. All these farmers that are getting into this, most of them don't know where the processors are. They don't know how it gets turned into the isolate that ultimately gets put into products. They don't have a marketing strategy for taking a finished product to market. And that's not their fault, by the way, because for most farmers, traditionally, they work in operations where they produce the crop and there's a processor that takes it and turns it into something. And so in this case here, there's and we saw this last year after harvest. You saw where a lot of farmers jumped into it, bought seeds, were given these promises of, well, if you just grow it, there's a market on the other side, and the farmer didn't know how to take it to market. Not saying that's the case for all growers. There's some very good growers out there that know exactly how to take that crop from field to shelf, but that's a lot. I mean, you're talking about 100 different objectives to have a vertically integrated farm to shelf type of company. So, you know, for us, one of our big programs that we're running right now is our Buy Texas Hemp campaign. And this is literally, it's actually in our logo now, Buy Texas Hemp. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to leverage my expertise on the retail sales side to help find buyers for our members. And so far, we're doing pretty good. We've got some commitments that on the surface right now, they appear to be at such an extent that they could possibly cover all of our operations this year. If and when that happens, we will have some very strong contracts to bring to our growers. We will be having contracts signed with our buyers. And by the way, if I may off into another tangent here, that is another major problem in this industry that leads to loss, is a lack of contracts. It is amazing to me. I come from an industry where we need contracts. If you don't have a contract, somebody else is going to come and take your business from you, and then they're going to take their money and go somewhere else. So when I got into this business and I started realizing that only a few farmers were actually getting contracts and all the other ones were operating off of handshakes, or the retailers, they're doing the exact same thing. It's really a mess right now on the buyer side, because the buyers have so much power right now over the market. There is so much biomass and CBD isolate and distillate just sitting on the market, not being used, that the buyers, they don't feel like they have to enter into agreements. I literally have talked to buyers just within the last month that have told me, well, why would we sign a contract if, you know, the price is possibly going to be half of what it is today, and I can just call 5 different processors and put them against each other, compete them against each other. And this is something that I am very deliberately, personally, and we've got a couple of people that we're talking to. They understand that we want contracts. We want things in writing, because by getting a contract, you are guaranteeing something, a buyer, you know, and that's what we're talking about, is a buyer to sign a contract with us. We are guaranteeing that there's a buyer lined up. And if that buyer, for any reason, was fooled, our contract will have the appropriate clauses in it to hold them accountable. So the lack of contracts in this industry has created a general mistrust amongst farmers. We're seeing this. I've got these seed companies calling me, freaking out. I just talked to one earlier today, and he's telling me, what's going on? Why is nobody growing more than 5 acres? And I'm sitting there and I'm telling him, I'm saying, I'm not going to be able to convince any farmer on this planet to put 50 acres or 100 acres in the ground if they don't know where it's going and how they're going to be paid. And that's going to take having something in writing, so that we can have a mutual understanding amongst all parties of what the expectations are and what the deliverables are and how we get paid and when we get paid. And so we're really trying to solve that. And I think here over the next few weeks, you're going to see us come out with some really neat announcements that will hopefully have addressed some of what I just talked about there.
Yeah, that's great you say that. I mean, a lot of what you said has been echoed on this podcast specifically. I recently had Erica Stark on, who's the executive director of the National Hemp Association, and she was talking exactly about that in terms of the importance of farmers having contracts in place, um, starting small, right? If they're thinking about getting into it, don't plant so many acres. Start small, and then learn as you grow. And so it's just good to see that everybody's on the same page in terms of education and protection of ultimately the farmer who is the source of all this. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk about current prices, right? So what can a farmer expect to pay when it comes to CBG or CBD in different applications, whether it's smokable or it's an oil or what have you, at a wholesale level?
Are you talking about what does the finished crop sell for?
Yes, the flower. Yes, the flower itself, the flower.
Okay, the flower. So on CBD, I am seeing pricing as low as 150 a pound. It can actually go lower than that. But in the cases where it would go lower than 150 pounds would be, let's say it's seeded, for example. You let males in your field, and as a result, they pollinated your females, and now your flowers are packed with seed. I know somebody that just bought like 1,000 pounds at $20 a pound, but it's packed with seed. So that particular buyer there has to do specialized processing on that flower in order to actually get the flower material separated from the seeds. And as a result, they pay a lower price per pound. If it's still on the branch and it hasn't been trimmed, it hasn't been shucked, then you may find that you're only getting 75 a pound or maybe 100 a pound. I know flower last year after harvest, untrimmed flower was going for about 100, 125 a pound. But on back to just regular, let's assume that you trim it, dry it, it comes out perfectly. Depending on that CBD level, we're seeing pricing, bulk pricing. If somebody's buying, say, 50 pounds at a time, they might be getting it for 150 a pound. But it can go for higher. I've seen it going for 200, 300, $400 a pound. You get online and you look at some of these hemp warehouse websites, for example, and they're trying to sell it for 700, 800 a pound.
Mm-hmm.
So the markup is pretty incredible on the retail side. In fact, in some cases, some of these retailers are literally charging weed prices, which I kind of think is silly. But that's what they're doing is they're taking that flower that they're buying for, say, $150 from a bulk supplier, and they're boosting it up to almost $1,500–$1,800 in value. So that's CBD. CBG, again, I've heard low pricing on CBG at about $250 a pound. And I've heard of pricing going all the way up to $500–$600 a pound. So we've got a lot of growers this year that are growing. I'm actually personally growing CBG this year, and they're doing that with the expectation of producing a smokable flower that they can hopefully take to market and make maybe $300–$400 a pound off. So I don't know if that answers the question. And I don't know if you want me to go into isolates and distillates or not, but obviously that's different price factors there.
Yeah, why not? Sure, if you don't mind.
So yeah, I mean isolate CBD oil, low end. I think I've heard it going for about 700, 750 a kilo. I know that there's guys out there that sell it for 1,200 a kilo. CBG distillate is last I checked anyway on it, it was about $8,000 a kilo, probably 7.5 now. I bet maybe even a little bit lower, maybe higher actually, because technically the market's probably going a little dry right now. So, but I'll tell you this much. I am very concerned this year because you do have a lot of farmers that because of that total THC compliance standard that was pushed out by the USDA, You have a lot of farmers this year that are abandoning CBD and instead growing CBG because it doesn't have that issue of running hot. So I've talked with a few processors and a few inline buyers that they actually think that we may see a shortage of CBD isolate by the end of the year, maybe. And if that happens, I don't think that that's a bad thing. It allows the market to kind of clear itself out. And then, of course, isolate prices will come back up at that point. But right now, there's a lot of focus on CBG. And I get very concerned by that because it took so long for the public to accept CBD. And now all of a sudden there's this sort of wild theory out there that there's going to be this ginormous market open up for CBG at the end of the year for distillate for isolate CBG products. And my research has shown the exact opposite, that the CBG market is not that big. CBG isolate is not that big of a market. For every 20 kilos of CBD isolate, there's probably 1 kilo of CBG isolate being sold. So I think it's going to be very competitive at the end of this year, and I'm very curious to see what's going to happen to CBG pricing.
Yeah. Well, what I've been told, I had Adam Jocks and Chris West on the podcast, and they talked about the difference between isolate and full spectrum, and how really you really want products that are full spectrum. Obviously, it's the preference of the customer and the consumer, but from a health benefit wise, full spectrum is better because you want those cannabinoids to work together to give that kind of full effect. I think the analogy he used is like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater when you go full isolate. And what's also interesting, and what I'm concerned about, is first off, we I think, as we know, there's a lot of over marketing with CBD, and so the public's knowledge and understanding of the medicinal benefits of CBD, I don't think, are quite there yet. And what I'm fearful of is that if CBG becomes the new flavor of the week, will people really understand the medicinal value of that cannabinoid, or will they compare it to CBD? Because from what I've been told by Dr. Zach Hildebrand, they're completely different in what they do, right? CBD is anti-inflammatory. It's for pain and anxiety, whereas CBG has more neurological effects. So helps with memory and things like that. So I really hope that once these products are rolled out, that there is a education around what they actually do, instead of just throwing them in an energy drink or making a gummy that has more sugar than the actual cannabinoid does.
Right, exactly. Well, it's a matter of seeing what the market will take, and I couldn't agree more with that. I think that CBG just now hitting farms, these genetics are just now coming out this year from seed companies that have been working on them for several years. Some of them haven't even been working on them for several years. So some of these CBG genetics that will be going into the field this year will not be that great. And hopefully not amongst our farmers, because we really vetted our varieties, but others out there may find that they're going to come to harvest and they're going to have, once again, a crop that is unsellable. This goes back to kind of your question even on fraud, because we actually had a guy, I was talking to one of our members who wanted to grow 60 acres. And it took 3-4 weeks. We were sitting there going back with him, and then we later found that there was actually a partner involved who was really the financier, and so we're having to bring them on the discussion. And at the end of the day, what I ended up having to do was I literally had to go out there and find the buyer who was willing to sign the contract for his CBG biomass before I personally even felt comfortable putting that farmer in that direction, because I just feel like there's going to be a lot of hype this year around it, and that the result is just going to be a oversupply come harvest. And there's not very many companies that are putting it into, well, let me talk about that for a second, because I think it's important to understand how CBG is really even being used, which is that most retailers are buying CBG to simply add it into their CBD oil. So they're doing it to try to boost up that value of their product, but they're still CBD dominant products. There are not very many companies out there. I think one of them is called Steve's Goods. That's one company that makes CBG derived products. And it's very specific stuff too. I think it's like toothpaste. It's, certain types of creams and stuff. So it's like you said, it's a different therapeutic value, and it certainly will find its place in the market. But whether or not the adoption by the public will be at the right time, and whether or not it will take away and detract from the energy behind CBD that's yet to be determined. We'll see at the end of this year, I guess.
Right. Which is the waters that we navigate every single day in this industry, right?
Right.
Both
now I want to be clear too that smokable flower for CBG is going to be very strong. That market, I don't think will have any problem at all, because the smokable market is very hot, and good CBG flower seems to be in a short supply. So growing smokable flower, I think, is going to be great, but I think you're going to have a lot of major league farmers out of Oregon and Colorado. This is what I've heard anyway, is that a lot of your big farms that were doing CBD last year are now switching to CBG. So there will be biomass farms specifically for CBG this year, and it'll just be interesting to see how that affects the whole entire market.
Right. No doubt. Well, Zach, I think we're almost out of time here, man. Is there anything else that you want to plug, maybe, or leave the audience with?
Sure. So we're actually getting ready to come out with a brand new field management technology. I'm not going to announce the name of it yet, but the name is really cool. And so what this is going to do is this is going to be a program that's available to every Texas Hemp Growers member. And so if you're not a member of Texas Hemp Growers, of course, go to hemptx.org and you'll be able to join there. It's $79 a year. But this new program we're about to launch is going to allow our farmers to actually manage the compliance and the records of their grows. And then we'll be able to provide field traceability, really the full seed to shelf traceability to the retailer, so that it's a really cool program. It's going to automate a lot of stuff for the farmers and the processors and the retailers, so that they're able to produce a product that a customer will be able to just scan the QR code and it'll show them everything, not just a COA, but the license holder who grew the hemp, the seed company that sold the hemp seed to them, the sanitary certificates, COAs, approval letters, the whole 9 yards there. So expect to see an announcement on that this week, and we're going to be opening up an early test phase to our members next week. So we would love any extra members that want to join. Once again, can do so at hemptx.org. And I appreciate you having me on the show today, Kevin.
Absolutely. Hey, that sounds exciting. And I appreciate you being on. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye, guys.